Good evening, YouTube. Welcome back to the channel. This is IMAX Sports and Football video, and today I'm going over my Week 17 power rankings of the 2022 NFL season. I do power rankings on the channel every single week. It's the most popular series, so if you enjoy, make sure to come back next week. I got a microphone for the first time on the channel, so yeah, hopefully the quality of the audio is better, or at least more consistent, because I know that some videos it's great, some videos it's horrendously bad. So hopefully it can be more consistent and a little bit better on the best videos. So let's get right into it. First off, we have, Merry Christmas to all of you also, or whatever holiday you celebrate in the holiday season. First off, we have the dumpster fire. As always, we have the Bears at 32, we have Denver at 31, we have the Falcons at 30, and we have the Texans at 29. The Texans beat the Tennessee Titans, a divisional matchup, in a series where the Titans have been doing poorly recently and the Texans have been playing very well. Texans played a good game against Dallas and the Chiefs recently, as well as beating Tennessee, who previously was winning the division in the AFC South. Houston's played well the past 3 weeks and are moving up the ranks. The Falcons are at 30, Broncos are at 31, and the Bears are at 32. Bears have had another poor performance for quite a few weeks in a row now. They still are stuck at 3 wins, and they're not getting any better. The Broncos, horrendous performance against the Rams this week. They lost 51-14 to a team that cannot score at all. Baker Mayfield's starting to look okay, and yeah, horrible game. And then the Falcons lost this week. They didn't lose too many spots. They only lost a spot to Houston, because honestly they didn't play that horrible of a game. It wasn't the easiest matchup in the world, and they're just not playing well right now. Moving on to bad, we have the Cardinals at 28, we have the Rams at 27, and we have the Colts at 26. Cardinals dropped significantly this week. Tampa's been on a losing streak. They've lost, I think, 3. They lost 4. They've lost 2 in a row. Arizona's been really bad recently, especially with their third-string quarterback, Trace McSorley, playing. And overall, Arizona, yeah, they're not great with Kyler Murray. Without Kyler Murray, they're horrible. The Rams are improving, or at least it looks like they're improving. They beat the Raiders a couple weeks ago, and now this week they had a really strong game against one of the worst teams in the league. I mean, they've been up and down for a lot of the year, mostly down, but if they can finish on an upswing, then that might be a positive for their team. As for the Colts at 26, they have not played yet this week. They're playing against the Chargers tomorrow, but it'll be an interesting game. I think that the Chargers will probably win, but if the Colts could get an upset, they probably wouldn't increase in their position. They might increase 1 or 2 spots, but they've just been really inconsistent, and last week's loss was just sad. Next up, we have the NFC South plus Cleveland. We have the Panthers and the Saints with the Cleveland Browns at 25, 24, and 23. The Cleveland Browns dropped this week with the loss to the Saints. They lost 17-10. Deshaun Watson has looked horrendous in his return. He might look better next season. He might look better the last couple of weeks of this year, although I doubt it. He hasn't played in a year and a half, so you can't blame him. But a lot of quarterbacks, when they come back, it takes them maybe a week or 2, and then they get back into it. Joe Burrow had a phenomenal season last week after missing a lot of football and not even playing a lot in the professional league to begin with his rookie year. But Deshaun Watson, a horrible start to the season. They've regressed from where they were with Jacoby Brissett, and the Browns are not in a great place right now. Carolina put up 37 points this week against the Detroit Lions. Lions were on a win streak, a hot streak. I thought the Lions were going to be making the playoffs, potentially doing well in the playoffs. Panthers come in, beat them up. Not even close. They ran all over them. They had over 200 rushing yards in the first half. It was a sad performance by the Lions. Carolina's looking stronger and stronger every week. They might be able to win the division if they beat Tampa, because they'll be 2-0 against them and with the same record. The Saints have lost 2 divisional games to Tampa and 1 to Carolina. Although a lot of their losses, I believe, are due to injuries that they've had this season. And just inconsistency in the roster. As the Saints have been healthier and healthier, they've gotten better and better. Big games for the Panthers for the final 2 weeks. If they win out, they'll win the division, because they have a game against the Saints and a game against the Bucks. And they'll be 5-1 in the division if they win both of them with the same record as Tampa. If they lose one or both of them, they could be out depending on which game they win. I think the Tampa game is more important, but a win against the Saints would be huge as well, especially if Tampa loses their game against the Falcons. Moving on, we have new lows every week. We have 22, the Tennessee Titans, and 21, the Seattle Seahawks. Both of these teams started off extremely hot. The Titans started off 7-3, Seattle started off 7-4. Now they are both 7-8. Titans are on a 5-game losing streak. Seahawks are on a 4-game losing streak. Titans just this week losing to a divisional rival and losing the division to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars obviously haven't won the division yet, but they're in the driver's seat. If they win out, they win. And the Titans are not looking great. They've lost 5 in a row. Obviously, that's horrible. And they just look worse and worse and worse every single week, even when Derrick Henry does well. This week, they lost to Houston. So yeah, they'll be playing Jacksonville for the division coming up. But a loss to Houston is not great, especially when Derrick Henry has a phenomenal game. 21 is Seattle. Again, they've been just regressing. Geno Smith had a stretch where he looked phenomenal, but now he's just kind of looking more like Geno Smith, and their defense isn't doing them any favors like it was at the beginning of the season. The Seahawks have had a tough stretch of schedule, but they really should be looking better than they have. Even if it's the tough stretch of schedule, they should be playing better than they are against these good teams. Moving on, we have Tampa at 20 and we have Green Bay at 19. Both of these teams are back in the top 20 for the first time in a long time. Tampa's been in and out of the top 20, but Green Bay has been out of it for quite a while. They got back in this week with their win over Miami. They're on a little bit of a win streak on their own. Tampa broke their losing streak. Both of these teams are 7-8. Similar to the Titans and the Seahawks, and every team that's in the category above them. And some of the other teams, there's a lot of teams that are 7-8 right now. Tampa and Green Bay, I think, are two of the most confusing teams at 7-8. Green Bay's just been all over the place, although they've been looking better offensively recently. Tampa has just looked bad offensively all season, and I'm not sure how they win any games. They won this week to the Cardinals, who are obviously on their third-string quarterback and dead. But it was a solid win. They won how I expected them to win, just poor offense and good defense. And yeah, overall, both of these teams are looking to try and potentially make it into the playoffs. Not sure if either of them will. Tampa currently is in a playoff position because they are leading their division, but it's going to be a tight race in the NFC South. Moving on, we have Purgatory. We have the Jets, the Patriots, and the Raiders. At this point in the season, all three of these teams are not making the playoffs, and all three of these teams are not getting good draft picks. The Jets were in the playoffs for quite a while, so were the Patriots, but both of them have gone on losing streaks. The Patriots explicitly are trying to lose games, as they ran into the kicker against the Vikings to secure the loss after we were winning. They fumbled the ball against the Raiders after the bad touchdown call in order to secure the loss after we were winning. And now this week, we made a 22-point comeback against the Bengals, and instead of scoring the touchdown, we fumbled the ball on the 4-yard line. So we are purposefully trying to lose games at this point. I think that we're tanking for someone. I'm not sure who we're tanking for, considering we already have 7 wins, but I think we're tanking in some capacity. The Jets are the Jets, so they're just being bad because they're the Jets. And the Raiders are actually getting better and better and better every week, but they dug such a big hole they can never get out of it. They would be higher, but they lost this week to the Steelers in a horrendous fashion because Derek Carr threw 3 interceptions and once again looked horrible with Devontae Adams on the field. Derek Carr, with all the weapons that he has, still cannot put together a solid game for his life and needs Josh Jacobs to get 150 yards for them to have any chance of winning. Moving on, we have playoff hopefuls in the New York Giants. The Giants are no longer in this category. I have been switching things around, so we just have the playoff hopefuls. We have Washington at 15, we have the Steelers at 14, we have the Lions at 13, and we have the Dolphins at 12. The Dolphins are officially playoff hopefuls at 8-7, although they are in the playoff picture. They need to win next week against the Patriots. If they lose next week against the Patriots, then the door is officially blown wide open once again for them to lose their playoff spot, as they have another divisional game against a tough Jets opponent. Yes, the Jets are still tough, in my opinion, depending on the week. The Lions are 7-8, so are the Steelers, and Washington is 7-1. The Lions lost this week, sadly, to the Carolina Panthers, although I do still hope that they do well for the rest of the year. Rooting for Amon-Ra St. Brown. He didn't make the Pro Bowl, but I hope that he continues to do well because he's my guy. Steelers, I'm still rooting for Mike Tomlin to finish 9-8. I think that would be great. I love that the Steelers have a 17-season streak of doing well, having a record above 500, and I think that the Steelers could be interesting in the playoffs if they make it. I think that it would be cool to see Kenny Pickett in the playoffs. I think that it would get him some good experience, and it's always fun to watch the Steelers. Especially with the teams they have this year. They play some really weird games, and some of them turn out really interesting. They beat the Raiders this week and the Panthers last week. They're beating some opponents that can have good weeks. And yeah, it's been fun to watch. And as for the Washington, they're on a 2-game losing streak. Obviously tough opponents, but they got demolished by the 49ers. They lost to the Giants in a very tight game after tying with them. But yeah, overall, wasn't sure if Washington and the Steelers should be higher, but because the Steelers are currently hotter, I had them higher. Moving on, we have the island of playoff mediocrity. We have the Giants, the Jaguars, the Chargers, and the Ravens. All of these teams are currently in the playoffs. I expect most of them to make the playoffs. I think the odds of the Ravens or Giants missing the playoffs at this point in the season are very low. But the Giants obviously could lose out, and the Ravens, I think, are secured. Don't quote me on that, but I think that they might have secured a playoff spot this week. Or if they didn't, the odds of them securing a playoff spot next week, whether they win or lose, are pretty high. As for the Chargers and Jaguars, the Chargers have not played yet this week. They are 8-6 going into their game against the Colts. If they lose to the Colts, they're in a pretty tough position, honestly. That should not be a game they should be losing, although the rest of their schedule isn't the hardest in the world. It could be easier. And if they win this week, they'll be 9-6, and they'll most likely be making the playoffs. As for Jacksonville, they're 7-8. They need to beat Tennessee if they want to make the playoffs. They need to win the division, and to win the division, they gotta beat Tennessee. Right now, the AFC South goes through Jacksonville because Jacksonville is divisional tiebreakers, and if they win out, they win out. If they beat Tennessee next week, then I think that they will be locked for the division because of divisional tiebreakers. So that game against Tennessee is huge. They just need to win that one, and they're in. But if they lose, if Derrick Henry goes off, if something happens, then Tennessee might be able to get that playoff spot right at the tail end of the season. As for the Giants, they lost this week to the Vikings. Didn't really affect their positioning, though, because Jacksonville moved above them and Miami moved below them. Miami lost to the Packers, so yeah, that was a tough game for them. And they're on more of a losing streak than the Giants are, just because the Dolphins are just looking worse and worse every week. Their offense is clicking in some capacities, but their defense is not making up for some of the inadequacies on offense. And the Giants are just looking like they have all season. So they're just continuing to do their thing, and I think that 11 is a pretty solid spot for them. Moving on, we have the Super Bowl contenders. We have the Minnesota Vikings at 7, and we have the Dallas Cowboys at 6. Yes, the Cowboys did not move up for beating the Eagles. The main reason for this is because Jalen Hurts was out. And a lot of Cowboys fans are going to say, oh, Jalen Hurts was out, but we still put up 40 points on the Eagles. And what I say to that is, you got 20 points off turnovers. One of the biggest reasons why the Eagles have been so successful is because they don't turn the ball over, and they get a lot of turnovers. The Eagles play like the Eagles got a pick 6. They play like they usually do on defense, but they turn the ball over 4 times on offense. And yes, Miles Sanders did fumble once, but that led to a field goal. 17 points off turnovers for Dallas in this game from Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew had two interceptions and a fumble, which led to 17 Dallas points. If Jalen Hurts was playing, he may have turned the ball over once, but I think it would have been a different story. Obviously, you can't say for sure, but I think that the quarterback situation impacted the Eagles significantly in this game, and I don't think that the Dallas Cowboys would put up 40 against them in a game where Jalen Hurts is playing. So, yeah. Also, the fact that they were in a game with Gardner Minshew in Dallas, it wasn't the most impressive win in the world for Dallas, as it could have been, but obviously they did beat the best team in the league. I didn't think it was enough to increase them any spots, simply because Hurts wasn't playing. And if you say that that's unfair, well, I was hesitant to move the Eagles up because they beat Dallas without Dak Prescott. So I was hesitant to put the Eagles at 1 for a lot of the beginning of the season because of the people they were against. So everyone can be a little hurt by who they're playing against which weeks. But Dallas is not moving up this week for this win. As for the Vikings, they're staying at 7 also. They beat the Giants in Vikings fashion. My opinion of the team is still the same. Both of these teams would be in the top 5, but there's just 7 teams that are top 5 caliber teams, and I think the other teams in the top 5 are better than these two. Last but certainly not leastly of the NFL's elite, obviously, yes, there are 7 teams that should be in the top 5, but these are my top 5. Kansas City's at 5, Buffalo's at 4, the Bengals are at 3, the 49ers are at 2, and the Eagles are at 1. Kansas City and Buffalo had dominant wins against bad teams, so yeah, that was expected. So they stayed at 5 and 4. The Bengals stayed at 3, even though they had a very shaky win over the Patriots. They were able to force a fumble when they needed to, and it was a very important game for them for playoff positioning and divisional positioning. So, big game for the Bengals. I'm keeping them at 3 because I really didn't think that they played that poorly. They dominated us in the first half, and I didn't think that Buffalo's win over the Bears was enough to really put them at 3. At 2, we have the 49ers. Also, if you're arguing Buffalo's better than the Bengals, then beat them next week. If Buffalo wants to be higher than the Bengals, beat them next week. That's what I'm saying. So, if Buffalo, if you want to be higher than Cincinnati on my power rankings, win next week and you will be. 49ers are at 2. Big game this week for them. They just absolutely, I forgot who they played. They just demolished them. Wasn't it? Oh, Washington. Yeah. It was a playoff opponent. Washington's been in the playoff race a lot of the year. The Giants came in there and just wrecked them. 37-20. Brock Purdy's looking great. I put the 49ers at 2 when Brock Purdy started, and I said, prove me wrong. They have not proved me wrong yet. They've continued to play like a number 2 team, and I think they will for their last 2 games of the season because their opponents are pretty easy. And obviously the Eagles are staying at 1. If they lose another game this season, then some other team might move into the number 1 spot, especially if the Bills can beat the Bengals. But for right now, the Eagles are staying at the number 1 position with their win over the Cowboys. If Hurts continues to be out and Gardner Minshew continues to have turnover problems, the Eagles probably won't change positions. But if Gardner Minshew has a great game and the defense has a bad game or a couple bad games in a row, Eagles might move, but they've really solidified themselves at the 1 spot. So, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace. Huge shout out to Quinn Lacey for supporting the channel with a channel membership.